I'm just scanning the roster and I see all board members with the exception of Amy.
All right. I'll just give Amy just a minute or two. You haven't heard that she's not going to be here?
No.
Okay.
Oh. You know what, Don? I think she may be out of town.
Oh, okay. All right, then we'll get started here. It's 6 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Carbajal.
Yeah.
Kreitzer, yes. Penny.
Yes.
Sand. Hanson.
Yep, I'm here.
Paulson. Ron, are you on with us?
Matt, I believe I've seen him. Oh, there he is.
Okay, thank you. And Winkles is here. That should be all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt. We have no request for public forum. Is that correct, Greg?
Correct.
All right, moving on to the agenda additions or deletions. We have, let me back up a second. Greg, maybe we should cover how we should participation should work for those that want to address the board. So anyone who wants to address the board can log in to the Google Meet, and then at the end of the topic, or there'll be some time after motions and so forth for discussion, we'll pause and you can unclick your mute button and identify yourself, and then address the board. Please keep it brief and to the subject or the motion at hand. So anything to add to that, Mr. Johnson?
Perfect. Thanks, Don.
Then on to the agenda. We have one change to remove 8.7. Are there any other changes?
No other changes.
All right, if there's no objections, we'll move on to the approvals. First item there we have is the minutes. We have minutes from a special meeting on the November 2nd and meeting on November 12th.
Move to approve.
We have a motion there.
Yes,
Yep.
motion.
A motion from Ron. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Ozzy. All those in favor, a roll call.
Winkles.
Yep.
Paulson.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Penny.
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes. Carbajal.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, all voting in favor, the motion carries. Next, our cash flow report. We'll ask our treasurer to take us through that.
Opening balance $9,864,699.68. Cash receipts $2,199,060.92. Cash disbursement $1,249,455.43. Net payroll $815,478.10. Adjustment entry of $20 for a closing balance of $9,998,807.07. ADM 1776, 1,776.
Thank you, Ron. Is there any questions on the October cash flow?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from Scott. Is there a second? Second from Ozzy. All those in favor, a roll call.
Winkles,
Yep.
Wilson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kenny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes, Burball,
Yes.
All right, all voting in favor, the motion carries. We have our budget to actual. Is there anything in there to address?
Nothing to point out there this month.
Any questions, board members? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Johnson, anything you want to point out in there?
Yeah, I'm going to jump right down into donations. The top half, pretty standard filling of positions. Really to note the incredible support again. We say this every month, but if you look closely this month, a new scholarship that was added. Mr. Wiggy, I know, met with the family and got that set up. Albany Band Boosters, very generous donation for instruments. Oak Township, towards Freeport, covers part of our school district, donated part of their CARES Act funding to the school district. And then you'll see, and to no surprise, the continued support of the Albany JCs and what they continue to do for our school district in the variety of areas that they've reached out and supported.
Any other questions on the consent agenda? Very generous donations, of course. Yes.
I think I throw some kudos out to Mr. Wiggy. I think did he attend that meeting for us, Tim?
The meeting for the scholarship you're talking about?
The JCs.
Oh, yes, they were very, very generous and just let me keep talking, so that helps.
All right, if there are no further questions on the consent agenda, a motion to approve this would be in order.
So moved from Scott.
Motion from Scott,
Second from Lynn.
and second from Lynn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, roll call.
Winkles,
Yep.
Wilson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes, Burball.
Yes.
Thank you.
All voting in favor, the motion carries. On to reports. Greg, do you want to take us through both of those?
I will. I spoke to our student representatives earlier this week and today, and we won't have an update. Next month, we'll definitely have one from Andrew and Kylie. And then I have about 25 Purple Pride cards here, and I do want to touch on a couple of those. So thank you as I bear with me as I read through just a few. And the first one I'll read is from Katie Radicke at Albany Elementary. And this is a shout out to our support staff at Albany Elementary. And I think this could be extended across the district, specifically those in kids company, community ed, our paras, custodial staff, and kitchen staff. When we decided to switch from hybrid to at-home learning, this plan was relatively clear for those who would be learning from home. Alternatively, we have a group of children who qualify for SPED support or childcare support in our building, while all of the adults involved from both Albany Elementary and Albany Kids Company, they've worked here before. The change in their job descriptions and their duties changed overnight. With the number of absences fluctuating on a daily basis, the support staff has had to reorganize, reschedule, change plans at the drop of a hat, work with unfamiliar students, learn new technology, juggle kids from 4 different classes, logging into 4 different teachers, all in the same room at the same time, and make sure they do their work and make sure it's done well. All of this while not hearing a word the teacher's saying because all of the students are listening with headphones on. We've had community ed staff subbing and serving, and including Elisa, Kelly, and others. Shout out to Elisa. We had Anna Ponick return from college to help out as well. These people are simply amazing. As Katie indicated, I've seen them step up like never before. They're grateful to be at work, and they are working harder than ever before and vital to making the unfortunate situation we are in work, and they need to be commended. So a shout out to all of our support staff. And again, I've got a slew of others that we can share another time.
All right. Thank you for those reports. We'll move on to the business part of our meeting, and our first item there is the Truth in Taxation report.
Well, welcome everybody to our annual Truth in Taxation hearing, where each year in December, we present our current year budget, as well as we provide information on the changes to the school district's portion of next year's property tax levy. At the end of my presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So please hold your questions till the end of the presentation. Okay, so the first part of this presentation is to discuss the district's current budget and budget information. The budget that the Truth in Taxation hearing is about really is regarding the fiscal year 22 revenues. So, but because we're not creating that budget yet, we're going to talk about our current year budget in this presentation. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so our district budget is divided into 5 different funds. We have the general fund, which really covers all of the operating expenses of the district, and now includes the student activity accounts and the scholarship accounts as well. And then we have the food service, community service, construction projects, and the debt service fund. Each year in November, we publish our budget in the local newspaper, and also it is available on our website in November each year. It covers what our actual expenditures were and revenues for the prior year and the budget for the current year that we're in. And you can visit this on our website at any time. I'm going to get into more of the details as we go in here. So, okay, our current year budget. This budget was approved at our November 12th board meeting. We did a revised budget to our preliminary that was approved in June, mainly because of additional revenue that was received for COVID-19 relief to cover our expenses. So this is a revised budget that was done last year. You can see that our revenue budget for all funds is $25,373,945. Our expenses for the entire budget is $27,925,578. And the following slides will give us a little bit more detail in those numbers. Okay. So you can see that the revenues for all funds, like I said, was just over 25.3 million. And as I mentioned, that the majority of these revenues come from involving the general fund for our operating expenses to cover our just at 82% for the general fund. And you can see the percentages for the rest of the other 4 funds there. Okay, so speaking of the general fund itself, just almost $21 million. The majority of that is actually the revenues are coming in from our state aid, which is 82% of the revenues. And then we have our property taxes that are at 10%. And normally we have in federal funds, we only have like 1% of federal funds, but because of all the COVID relief funds, that covers the 4% there, and another 1% with our regular federal aid. And other revenues would be local revenues and various fees and other revenues that are not related to state aid or levy dollars. So, our expenditures. The expenditure budget for all 5 funds is projected at just about $28 million, of which again, the majority, 76%, are for the general fund. The construction fund consists of approximately $50,000. You can see the 1.9 million construction fund is like $50,000 of that for expenditures is planning on paying off or spending down the rest of the 2016 building project. And the rest of it is for the current long-term facility maintenance projects that are being done right now. So, and then we got our community service at just about $1 million. Food service is just over $1 million as well. And the debt service is 9% at $2.5 million. Okay. Looking at the general fund expenses, you can see that the majority of the expenses are, again, for salaries and benefits for operating. This normally is about 78 to 82% in salaries and benefits for the general fund. This year, because a lot of the COVID funds came in, so they were spent more on the supplies, and so that kind of brought our supplies percentage up about 1% and brought down our salaries by 1%. But you can see that the majority of the expenditures are used for salaries and benefits here. All right, next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the fund balances, and there are 5 different fund balances involved with our balance of our funds. Non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So next slide. Our current year budget, this shows the estimated breakdown of where we will end up with our funds at the end of the fiscal year. And you can see here that we're projecting a change in the fund balance of a reduction of $452,000 in this is just the general fund we're talking about here. You can see the various changes. The main ones would be the deficit in the unassigned fund balance of about $342,000. And that will bring our unassigned fund balance to 11.22%, which is above our board policy, which is 8.3%. So you can see over in the far column that 613,657 is the amount that we're projecting to have for unreserved fund balance at the end of the year over what our board policy is of 1.770,237. So, and then just other various changes in other fund balances. You can see it listed there. Okay, looking at our fund balance history, the lighter purple color is the total fund balance, and the bluish purple is the unassigned fund balance, and you can see in comparison to one to the other. And it's just a different way of looking at the projected 11.2% fund balance for the end of this fiscal year as compared to our board policy. So Here's another way of looking at the unassigned fund balance. You can see what we've done for the past few years here. Just kind of a little, yeah. So it's looking, we're doing real good with our unassigned fund balance and staying above what our board policy is at this point in time. Okay. Okay, moving on to the 2020 payable 2021 levy certification. And again, I want to point out that these are revenues that are from the levy that will be coming in for the following fiscal year, 2021-22. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss a little bit about how the levy numbers are determined. And do a little comparison from last year's levy dollars to this year's. Specific reasons for the changes in the tax levy, and then what the impact will be on the taxpayers. School district property taxes. Each school district may levy taxes in over 40 different categories. Levy limits are the maximum levy amounts for each category that are set by either the state law or a voter approval. Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits for each district. Next slide. Schedule of events for approval of district's 2020 payable 2021 tax levy. On September 8th was when the Department of Education first distributed their levy worksheets and setting the maximum authorized levy for each school district. September 9th, our school board approved the proposed levy amounts, and we approved it at the maximum. Mid-November is when the county mailed the proposed property taxes for next year to all property owners. December 9th is today, and this is where we're having our public hearing. And following this hearing, the school board will certify the final levy amounts. Next slide. Okay, so an overview of the proposed levy for this year. The levy itself is showing an increase from 2020 by $218,351 or 7.04% increase. And the changes were mainly because of the increase. We are projecting an increase of 18 pupil units for next year over this year. And just various other increases that are, a lot of them are a result of those 18 pupil units. So we added 25,000 for unemployment compensation as we got some of that going on this year, which we normally don't. And then the other one would be an increase to the debt service levy by 127,000. So, next slide. Okay, so there are many factors that can cause a tax bill for an individual to increase or decrease from year to year. And the changes in the value of individual property are a big thing. Changes in the total value of all property in the district. Increases or decreases in levy amounts caused by changes in state formulas and local needs and costs and voter approved referendums and some other factors as well. Adjusted net tax capacity is the property value, the total property value in our district for all of the different property classes, coming up with a dollar amount that we can maximize to our tax capacity. So from 2019, our property values increased by about 300,000. I think it was, so over 2018, and it was a 3.4% increase over 2018. So, slide. Okay. This slide shows a tax comparison from one year to the next. And you can see in the general fund, our tax levy increased by 193,884. Community service had a decrease of 2,792. The general debt service had an increase of 127,258 for the 318,350, which again, as I said, is a 7.04% increase. Our tax base went up 3.4%, and with that $4,841,209 total tax levy, that would be utilizing 41.7% of our tax capacity, so our tax base. Okay. And this breaks down those changes to the levy a little bit. You can just see that from one year to the next, our local options revenue increased about 60,000, and just other various small adjustments to come up with an increase of 193,000. A little bit of OPEB there is 20,000. Just our LTFM, there was some adjustments going on with those due to our moving some dollars to the debt service, and as well as prior year adjustments that were happening. So in comparison to the year before. So 193,884.42 increase to the general fund. Next slide. Okay, so for community education, just a minor change here, $2,792 reduction in the levy. Not a whole lot of change there. Yeah. Next slide. And the debt service, here you'll see that our reduction for debt excess was reduced a little bit for the voter approved for the bonds. And that basically fluctuates from year to year based on what we're collecting over in what our debt expenses are, because they collect 105% of what we are expected to pay out in debt service. So, and at certain points in time when we get so far, they'll give us a reduction, and then that money basically reduces our taxes for the taxpayer. It goes back to them. So, and then you can see the long-term facility maintenance bonds increase there to 285,000. So an overall increase of $127,258 for the debt service for the year. Next slide. Okay, so the change in tax levy doesn't necessarily mean a change in the budget. Tax levy is based on many state-determined formulas plus voter-approved referendums. Some increases in tax levies are revenue neutral, offset by reductions in state aid. Expenditure budget is limited by state set revenue formulas, voter-approved levies, and fund balance. An increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an equal increase in the budget. Okay. Again, just reiterating about the school funding is highly regulated by the state. State sets the formulas which determine the revenue. Most revenue is based on specific amounts per pupil. State sets tax policy for local schools. The state sets maximum authorization for property tax levy. Districts can levy less, but not more than the amount authorized by the state unless it's approved by the voters. State authorizes school board to levy up to $724 per pupil in local optional revenue. And that's where we are with our operating referendum right now, is the $724 per pupil unit. State authorizes school board to submit referendums for operating and capital needs to voters for approval. Next slide. Okay, talking about the pupil units a little bit and how the state does their general ed funding. You can see that in the since 2015-16 school year, The state has increased our state per pupil unit from $5,948 to adding 2% each year for all of these years to $6,567 for the 2020-21 school year. And there's the weighting. You get additional weighting on that dollar amount for the students that are at grades 7 through 12. You get a 1.2 instead of a 1.0 for that formula. Next slide. This slide shows our ADMs, which are adjusted daily membership, and that's what the funding is based on from year to year. And you can see that it's kind of interesting how in 14-15 to 15-16 we increased, and then the next year was a minimal increase. The next year was a little larger increase, and then it was a little bit of a reduction, and then a little bit more of an increase. It kind of goes every other year, it seems like. So we are projecting a 18 pupil unit increase from this year to next year. What we did there is we adjusted it for some of the loss of the homeschool students and hopefully bring some of those back for next year. So okay, so the challenge right now on this for schools is that the state formula for Gen Ed aid really lags inflation. So since 2002-03, state general ed revenue formula has not kept pace with inflation. The fiscal year 2021 legislature approved an increase of 2% or $129 per student. Per pupil allowance for fiscal year 2021 of $6,567 would have needed to increase by another $639 to have kept pace with the inflation since 2002, 2003. So 9.7% increase. So that's why a lot of school districts are struggling right now. As far as per pupil funding for our district in comparison to the state averages, in 2021, we are ranked 263 out of 330 school districts in the Gen Ed revenue, and then our total revenue ranking, which would include our levy and other local sources, we are 293 out of 330. So that's just a little bit of an increase over last year for the Gen Ed aid, but and then dropping down quite a bit for the total revenue ranking. You know, yeah. And here's another way of looking at that. You can see that the first column shows the Minnesota average per pupil dollars is 11,609, and Albany's average is 10,073, which is 13.2% less. And you can see that the main difference in this is with the dark blue or the purple. The purple where you can see the local levies is the state average is 1301, and our district has the 724 that is allowed. So that's the substantial difference there, is that we've don't really have an operating referendum at this point in time. So that is about that. This is just another inflation graph that shows that the districts are depending on more on referendum revenue than ever before, because there's a gap in the inflation for the Gen Ed revenue, so aid, so from the state. So okay, state property tax refunds. State of Minnesota has 2 tax refund programs and 1 tax deferral program available for owners of homestead property. Minnesota Homestead Credit Refund or the Circuit Breaker, the Minnesota Special Property Tax Refund, and Senior Citizen Property Tax Deferral. These programs may reduce the net tax burden for local taxpayers, but only if you take the time to complete the forms and send it in. For help with the forms and instructions, consult your tax professional or visit the Department of Revenue website at revenue.state.mn.us. All right. So the next steps is the board will accept any public comments and questions on this proposed levy. And then after, the board will certify the 2020 payable 2021 property tax levy. So at this point in time, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we will try to answer any questions you may have. I'm not seeing any questions. Don, are you seeing anything?
I am not. Not hearing anyone unmuting to ask questions, so I guess you've done a very thorough job, Sue.
I guess. Yeah.
All right.
Or else everybody's sleeping. I don't know.
Well, with no questions, then we will move on to the next item, that is to certify the levy.
I would make a motion to certify the levy in the amount of $4,841,209.70. Matt?
We have a motion from Matt
I'll second the motion. This is Scott.
and a second from Scott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a roll call.
Winkles?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Penny?
Yes.
Reitzner? Yes. Carbajal?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, all voting in favor, the motion carries. Next item we have is our enrollment report. Mr. Johnson, anything you want to speak to on there?
Not really. Uptick of 3 students from October to November. And can certainly answer any questions related to that.
Are those new students or students coming back?
You know, I'll pause for principals. If principals, if you could speak to that, if you saw something happen in your building in regards to any students returning, that would be from homeschooling.
This is Paul. The middle school, we do have 1 returning.
And I had 2 new.
Do you know if is those 2 that were moving into the community, or are they coming from somewhere else?
The 2 that came into the community came, I believe, from, it was either Big Lake or Becker.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions on the enrollment report, then we'll move on to the Safe Schools learning model.
What I'd like to do for Safe Schools Learning Model tonight is I've got 5 areas I'd like to cover. First of all would be an overview of COVID-19 related data to our community school district and specifically our schools. Talk real briefly about the executive order from the governor, discuss our hybrid plans, and then have board members weigh in on our return to school plans. So let me start with current COVID-19 data. And so looking at Stearns County, this is a snapshot of the daily count of COVID cases in Stearns County over the last 14 days. Last day still on the chart is Thanksgiving, which is why you see 0 cases reported. But looking back to November 27th, it's definitely the trend is heading in the right direction, where we're seeing fewer number of positive cases in Stearns County. This is the 14-day case rate calculation that we've seen every month, every board meeting, and you can see last month or last week we were at 242. This week we are 247 cases per 10,000, and then next week in the county projected to drop to 199. And on the side, just to note, you'll see the county will oftentimes show the surrounding area counties, and that although Stearns County seemed to get a little bit of a jump start in cases in central Minnesota more recently, I think there's 10 counties that we tend to look at. The numbers are pretty even throughout central Minnesota. Looking at our school district specifically, our attendance area, the county number was at 247 last week. Albany was at 286 cases. And then tomorrow we'll see all these numbers updated. And the county is usually pretty accurate. And the county is estimating for Albany area, attendance area, for our number to drop over 100 points, 100 cases per 10,000 down to 173, actually dropping below the county case rate average, and no longer being one of the top in the county as a school district, and kind of falling right in the middle. Again, a positive trend to see. And then more specifically to our school district, in looking at our COVID-related absences for students and staff, and this is on our website, anyone can pull it up. This shows the county and school district case rates over time. And then more specifically, we have currently 18 COVID-related absences with staff while we're in distance learning. And board members, you'll remember the last probably month, that number has averaged around 35. That number has decreased significantly. We still do have 7 active cases within our staff. And then right now within our students, we have 49 COVID-related absences, and this really is not an accurate reflection of what's going on. That I know that number has typically been in 250 plus. My guess is an accurate reflection based on all the numbers would be lower than 250, but 49 is simply because we're just not getting reported those COVID-related absences like we do when we're in school. We are aware of 3 active positive cases within our students. So again, overall, headed in the right direction, at least trending for now. And then the other piece, just to point out, I think most of you know the CDC has revised their quarantine guidance, and states are now taking that information and making adjustments for Minnesota. It's the Department of Health looking at the decision-making tree that we use within our schools. And that information is still pending a little bit from the Department of Health, if they will accept the CDC guidelines, but it could reduce some of the quarantine times that we'll see when we bring students back in January. Board members, any questions about the COVID-19 data? I want to jump to the governor's executive order 2094 that I believe came out, looks like it came out November 13th. This executive order had about 10 to 12 different components for the state to weigh in on, and many of those, all of those were related to school districts. Some were recommendations, and some were requirements. And one of the requirements of the executive order is teacher preparation time. And I think we're all well aware, as is the state, that as we have students in distance learning and we have students in a hybrid model and teachers trying to teach in both models with students at home and students in school, that is definitely difficult work and challenging work. And so that additional 30 minutes of prep time was mandated by that executive order to be effective November 30th. And so for us in a distance learning model, which we're currently in, it's a little bit easier to meet that requirement on a day-to-day basis. In most of our buildings, the instructional day with students ends around 2:15. And then that time at the end of the day is for that added prep time. Where it gets to be more of a challenge is when we start to look at returning to a hybrid model and making sure we build that time in when we have students now in school. I do want to point out the executive order for the prep time. It does say here in bold from the Department of Education that the instructional minutes will exist as long as the peacetime emergency is in effect. So it is in alignment with that peacetime emergency. And so we'll follow the guidelines by MDE and the governor. As I dig into our hybrid planning, so in a perfect world, what's going to happen in our school district and most school districts across the state is we will see most of our districts who are currently in distance learning today make that transition back into a less restrictive model in January. And for most of us, that'll be into a hybrid model. So one of the recommendations that we're making when we make this change and we come back into the hybrid model, two things. One is that we include that our hybrid historically has been grades 6 through 12, and we need to expand that, would like to expand a true hybrid model into the elementary K through 5. And we talked about this, board members, briefly in October as we started to see some of the difficulties that were existing within our elementary, as well as we had many students at home and some students at home and students in the classroom and the challenges that created. So we were considering that at one point and then shifted into distance learning, and that for now at least eliminated that problem. So as we look at coming into hybrid and recommending hybrid K through 12 when we return, we'd like to make a shift from that 4-day model with Wednesdays off, that we shift that to Fridays. And the rationale is on the screen. I think I'm sharing that with you right now, is that we believe as we include elementary in that mix K through 5, pre-K through 5, that there is a higher level of work flexibility for parents on Fridays that I don't believe exists on Wednesdays. For families that need it, the Friday school work requirements could be completed and extended over the weekend versus in the middle of the week with Wednesdays. We also believe overall that our families are very used to adjustments on Fridays. We used to have monthly early outs on Fridays, and people have been able to adjust their schedules historically with Fridays. We also feel 4 days of continuous consecutive instruction is a good thing for our staff and less time away from school for our students, especially in middle and high school hybrid. Also for teacher planning in weekly increments, I believe, and our administrators would agree that planning in those type of increments makes sense as well. For all of our buildings, Fridays are typically the end of the quarter or end of grading periods, and it's much more convenient for us in completing grades and report card work that's done on Fridays. And our calendar has some Fridays off already. And so that consistency is a little bit more solid, let's say, than Wednesdays, where we typically don't have time off. And if we were to continue with using Wednesdays as that time off on top of the Fridays that we also have off, that could be lost instructional time for our students.
Greg, is the staff as a whole on board with that change?
You know, this information was brought to our building leadership teams by our principals, as well as talking to individual staff members. And like everything else related to COVID-19, it's all over the place. So is this 100% supported? No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Has the change to Friday been asked or, put out to the parents and at all? And they said this day works better?
We have not surveyed our parents. We did initially receive some feedback way back in the summer when we rolled out our initial plans and had Wednesdays off. There was some feedback from folks about why not Mondays, why not Fridays.
When we talk about that 30-minute prep time, how does that factor into if we do this model Monday through Thursday?
Thank you. That's a great lead in. So I'm going to scroll down on this document and just very lightly down in the bottom, what a typical Friday would look like. For the high school, you wouldn't see a significant change because our prep time requirements are a little bit different in the high school with an 85-minute block. So a Friday would look very much like it does right now for our students. And I do want to stress that I know sometimes I've heard people say that, well, Fridays, people perceive that as a day off. It's not a day off. There will be instructional time in all buildings, and in our middle school and elementaries, that instructional time will take place in the morning. There'll be a time to connect, live time with teachers and students, some time for meetings, and then the afternoon is how we would meet that 30 minutes of executive order prep time. And what we did with our administrators and union leaders is we looked at January, February, March, at least to begin with, how many instructional days are there each month, times 30 additional minutes each day, factored in on the Friday additional time, and it works out really well to have that 3 hours on a Friday to be able to build in that additional prep time.
Are the kids that are struggling, is that a day that they're able to come in if needed, or if they need that extra work?
Yeah, we haven't talked about what that would look like right now, Ozzy. I know in coming back into the hybrid and in getting the masses of students back in our building, that will help significantly. But as we look at a case-by-case basis of students that are struggling, I know prior to going into distance learning on Wednesdays, we were bringing some students in, so we would need to look at that in terms of these schedules and teacher availability. So I think it's definitely on the table as we look at the needs of our students. We would also continue with childcare on Fridays. So just like we've had throughout distance learning, if there are families that have challenges with childcare, they would be able to tap into that in both sites on a Friday. Our goal, I hope, would be that we're in a hybrid for a transition period of time as well, and that as our numbers hopefully continue to improve and we hear more and more positive news about a vaccine, that hopefully we'll be talking about bringing all of our students back on a day-to-day basis.
Greg, so the proposal that you have here for the 4 consecutive days, Monday through Thursday in the building, and then Fridays as distant learning, that would be for K through 12, not just the elementaries when we bring students back in. Okay.
The middle and high school, Scott, would continue in a true hybrid model. where we would make a shift to an AB model instead of the AABB. That was something that was supported by both middle and high school staff, that they would like that consistent connection with students and limiting the number of days away from students, so that we would shift into an AB.
But the calendar would match the elementaries in that situation. So instead of Monday, Tuesday, distant, Thursday, Friday, it would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then distant on Friday for all K through 12.
Correct.
Okay.
This is a pretty common approach when you look at what other districts are doing. There are a couple of districts that I'm aware of, and building in the prep time are doing it in one day over a period of time. In the executive order, that's not recommended. It's recommended to try to have that prep time as close to the actual work time as the teachers need it. So for whatever the life will be of that executive order, I think this makes a lot of sense. Other questions you have, board members?
What's the, with this model, what's your start date?
Can I put the question back on you?
Yeah, you can put it on me. What's the earliest date we can start?
Well, I think the earliest date that we've been told from the regional team through the Department of Health and Department of Education is waiting through winter break and the holidays. So my interpretation would be that January 4th would be on the table.
So bring January 4th start, because I know they wanted a staggered start. So January 4th would be K through 5, and then 6 through 12 can start on 2 days later, like on Wednesday.
I could see that as something that could be supported.
Can I hear from the administrators and about those dates, those January 4th and the 6th dates, please?
I'll just, can I chime in real quick as they try to turn their mics on? There's always that dilemma of the holidays and people gathering and coming together, and I'm watching our county numbers really closely, and I'm hoping we're not going to see a huge surge from Thanksgiving. It looks like we may not, just based on the trends that we're seeing. So we hope people make the same kind of decisions over the Christmas holiday break and choose not to gather and keep that risk low. So January 11th seems, maybe it gives us a little extra wait time, but I tell you, the feedback I've heard, especially from our teachers at the elementary level, has been loud and clear. Please bring our students back as quickly as we can in a safe manner. So with that, I'll turn it over to principals.
That's what I was going to say, Greg, is that our teachers are letting us know loud and clear that they want the students back, and do recognize that we need to do that safely. So I would just reiterate exactly what you said.
And it gets back to, like, yes, we want our kids back in school. The teachers want the kids back in school. The kids want the kids back in school. Where the spot where we get torn is if we come back too early and 3 days in, we're making phone calls to quarantine classrooms right away. That would be a very tough thing when we've worked so hard to separate. So a careful return in the long run will get us more time with our kids in the building.
Yeah, I can jump in there too. We'd like to see the kids back as soon as possible. I know along with us trying to decide on a return date, the State High School League is also trying to figure out when's a good time to return. Those, hopefully will coincide. The risk of too early is that we end up shutting down quick. I would hope that, if the determination is to return on the 4th, that we at least recommend or request that parents who have maybe had a bunch of people over on New Year's Eve isolate their kids a little longer just to be safe and something like that. I don't know if that would work or not, but I would like to get the kids back for sure so we could have a couple of weeks before the end of Q2. That would help a lot. So at least the 11th, so that we could have 2 weeks, that would make a big difference in the high school level.
Yeah, and I would agree with Tim looking at 6 through 12 and agree with Ann and Sue about the word patience comes to my mind. I want kids back. Didn't want them to ever leave either, and I know our staff didn't, but when things seem to be going in the right direction with data, now the word patience comes to mind. If we can just be patient a couple more days and maybe look at the 11th, that seems prudent in my eyes too.
If we go with the 4th or the 11th, what's the date where the new numbers come out prior to the 4th? What is that date? Do we know?
December 31st. Assuming the county is working that day. There's a chance too, and again, we really don't know how the state's going to weigh in on this. They've said the 11th and the 18th. So we could say the 4th. We could say the backup plan is the 11th. That way, we've given them 2 options to consider. I'd like to. We've been told we do not. We just found this out this week. We do not have to have an official meeting with the state to make these determinations. What we do is put our new proposal together, send it to the regional team, and they will consult with the state and let districts know if their plans have been approved. So it's a dialed back plan. So I have that prepared already, waiting to see what dates the board recommends that I'll plug in to hopefully send out on Monday, the 14th, to wait and hear back from the regional team.
Well, I would pledge my support for the 4th and the 6th. I expect that we're going to have these new quarantine guidelines by then, and I think that's going to help us out. And it seems, as much of our or more of our shortage on staff, comes with support staff, not just licensed teaching staff. And we've been hearing over and over that transmission of the coronavirus does not seem to be a problem in the schools when we follow those guidelines. So I'd like to bring them back just as soon as we can.
And I also support the 4th and the 6th. I guess I would ask if there's any opinions, from the other board members or staff against coming back that early.
I'm on board for the 4th and the 6th as well.
I support the 4th as long as our number stays down. If that creeps back up to where it is this week, then I think we need to think about the 11th. But no, I support the 4th, if we can keep that number down.
I would also support the 4th with the staggered. I just am very thankful for the exceptional teachers and support staff and families that have been so flexible and given so much during this pandemic. And I agree with Don. I've seen little or no evidence that schools following safety protocols present any risks that are less safe than a lot of the alternatives. So that, along with decreasing COVID numbers and the exceptional safety protocols we have, I would be 100% on board with starting on the 4th.
Can I make a motion?
I was going to suggest, if we could, Mr. Chair, if at all possible, if we could have two motions, maybe one for the return dates, and then a second motion for the Friday hybrid model changes.
So that would actually change, that second motion then would be to go to an AB using Friday as the distance learning, or I don't know what we call that Friday, but.
And I think that I think there was a suggestion that came up in community engagement and probably in other committees that we call it purple, white, because there's parents that are getting confused with day A and day B classes.
Correct.
All right, Ozzy, you were about to make a motion.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we return to a hybrid model K through 5 on the 4th of January, and 6 through 12 return on the 6th of January.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Ozzy, a second from Lynn. I will call for discussion. Greg, are you seeing any chats?
I am not.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, roll call.
Winkles,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes. Carbajal,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. With all voting in favor, the motion carries. And then next, we need a motion to address the hybrid learning model then for the AB plan with the Friday as a
I'll make that motion.
motion from Ron,
I'll second it.
and a second from Scott. I'll call for discussion. Any chats at all on that, Greg?
I don't see any. No.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, roll call.
Winkles,
Yep.
Paulson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes. Carbajal,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, all voting in favor, that motion carries.
Thank you, board members.
Move on to item 8.5, the seniority list.
Yearly, we bring the teacher seniority list to the board for approval. It's been reviewed by our teachers union and would ask your approval. I do want to note I appreciate the collaboration and work on this with union leadership over the past couple of years.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion from Ozzy to approve the seniority list,
Second from Lynn.
and a second from Lynn. Any discussion? Hearing none. This is a roll call.
Winkles.
Yep.
Paulson. Olson.
Hanson's yes.
Penny.
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes. Carbajal.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, Ron, I didn't get you. Paulson.
It was a yes, yes.
Thank you.
All right, all voting in favor, the motion carries. Our next item is the Minnesota State High School League invoice.
Board members, in your packet is a letter from the executive director of the high school league outlining a revised payment structure for the installment increases for member school districts. You'll see Albany area schools falls into that AA category. The change that was made was about just under $1,000 to our initial $7,000 additional invoice, now $6,044. The first installment is due on December 31st of $3,500. So asking for a discussion about this high school league dues.
This is the extra dues, right?
Correct.
I ran some, go ahead, Ozzy.
I'm suggesting we don't pay it.
I ran some numbers on these. Well, first of all, we made our payment in September, which was our normal membership payment. That had a increase in it as well. And these two initially were known as COVID-19, whatever, they didn't call them membership payments. They had a different name for them. And it's just to help them manage their budget shortfall of $2.5 million that they're taking, that's districts have to educate students, just to help float them through on their payroll. So I think this was easier than making some tough decisions and some cuts that they didn't want to do. But if you look at the numbers, you'll see that for a 1A school, well, for us, for our district, at a 2A school, that's between $10.64 a student and $29.49 per student. If you take that same number and you go up to the 4A school, that's between $3.36 a student at the lowest and $8.91. Definitely not equitable. And if you even go down to the single A schools, it's $21 to, if you were a very small school, $172 a student. It's ridiculous to even think that the smaller, more rural schools should have to, once again, pay the burden of this stuff, and the big schools get away with smaller amounts.
On a matter of principle, they've already increased our regular dues, and any additional monies comes out of our ability to educate children. I'm completely against giving the state any additional money, or not the state, but the Minnesota State High School League. They should take a loan out or figure it out themselves and not assess districts and impact students.
So Greg, what is our neighboring districts? What is their feeling? Any idea what their intent is?
Yeah, Scott Bungie and I, we had a community engagement board committee this week, and we talked about this a little bit. And Scott, although painful, Scott recommends that we pay it, and certainly respect board members what you're sharing here. Most districts, from what we're hearing, are paying it. Many are using their COVID resources to do it. There are a few with similar concerns to what I'm hearing tonight expressed by board members that are choosing not to pay it and taking a kind of a wait and see approach, not paying that first installment.
I am quite sure that if our taxpayers know what this money is actually for, and it isn't for the tournament or whatever, it's for their payroll and their shortfalls, like Don said earlier, that they would advise us not to pay this, because it's ridiculous that they would even come to us and ask that. I don't care if it's only $1. It's still it's our money to help educate our school and our kids, and that money should stay within our school district, not to go to them to pay because they didn't properly prepare.
So if we don't pay this, because there's another payment coming out, correct?
Yeah, the first installment of $3,500 is due the end of this month, and the second one, I'm assuming, I don't see a date, is $2,544 due sometime the second half of the year.
So, I mean, that's under our normal payment, correct? For the year? If we pay the $3,500 now, so could we pay that now to
No,
keep our membership with them?
We've already made our normal payment, right?
Yeah, around $4,000.
Okay.
Which, like Matt indicated, was a slight increase per student.
What this is they would have normally, had there been state tournaments, they would have had TV revenue, and they would have had revenue from gate fees or ticket sales. And that's what they're short. So they have lots and lots of administrative assistants on their payroll. And other staff, I'm not sure what they're doing right now without tournaments and other programs to run, but they've reduced their staff by only 4 full-time people. And quite honestly, we shouldn't even have to know this. This should be all on them, for them to come to us. I've gone to our legislatures about this, and they have little they can do at this point because they're not in session. But they might address this in January when they get there. So I would, if we don't pay it, if they're going to threaten anything upon us, we'll have some time to address this, but I'm confident of that.
So have they laid out any circumstances that'll happen if it's not paid?
Yeah, they have not, Ron.
They have not.
And that's my only, I can't argue with anything that's being shared here. I agree on all levels. I just want to make sure, but as Don indicated, if there's any threats or consequence that they might give us due notice of, I just want to make sure it doesn't, as I know you would as well, board members, not want it to impact our student athletes in any way.
Well, that's the thing we have to look at. We don't want to put our students at any kind of loss, not being able to participate or whatever the case may be, by taking a stand against the high school league and not paying their additionals.
And I think the good argument is we have paid our membership fee. And all the services that go along with that. And those are laid out on our membership. We pay so much per student, and it's all broke out on how they come up with that $4,000 membership fee. And we've paid that. So this is just a request for some more money to help them out.
Is there anything in the obviously we have to have a contract with them for their service, for the payment. Have they added anything in their contract that gives them the authority to surcharge all the districts in this situation?
I don't believe there's anything in the agreement with the high school league related to this.
I think that was already done when they increased our fee this year. And we, since like Don said, or I think Matt even said it, the fee was increased this year. And I'm assuming like every year it goes up a little bit per student, that 4,000 plus that we paid. So I'm in total agreement that we paid our membership for that.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to take a wait and see approach and not to approve the invoice. Because we've already paid our base fee.
Yeah, I like that idea too. Just take a wait and see how it shakes out. Obviously, there's other districts that are going to probably do the same thing, not pay it.
I think there are a few. Yes, I'm aware of a couple that have similar feelings here in regards to this extra fee.
So do we, Mr. Johnson, do we just decline to take action and that's good enough? Or do we have to explicitly make a motion not to pay?
I think we're okay with choosing not to take action. That'd be my opinion, Don. I'm not sure how you feel.
Exactly. I would say take no action. All right, if there is no more discussion on that State High School League invoice, then we'll move on to our next item, World's Best Workforce.
Welcome, Amy Notch, for an overview of World's Best Workforce. This has been a hot topic in the state this fall, if you can believe that. It's obviously it's on the December meeting like it is every other year for your approval board members, but it's a plan that many districts have had to put on hold with limited assessment data, no state testing. You'll see a dialed back plan. So Amy, thanks for your patience and thank you for putting this together.
No problem. Board members, if you have the chance to flip through it, you'll note that our World's Best Workforce Plan, which is kind of like a strategic plan in miniature based on goal areas established by the legislature, looks very much like it has in past years. Just a quick reflection on last year's plan. In all of the goal areas, with the exception of graduation rate, we didn't have any data to measure our school district by. With no MCAs and no spring benchmarking, we submitted our report, which is due December 15th, and just stated that the data wasn't there. And that's the case for a lot of districts. In the 5 key goal areas this year, which are a focus on instruction and student achievement, we've rolled forward our kindergarten goal that focuses on literacy and numeracy skills that are appropriate for kindergarten readiness. And we base that goal on our fall benchmark testing, which we did get in this fall. So we had a baseline. We took a look at that baseline, used the same types of percentages and measures, and we have our kindergarten readiness goal. 3rd grade literacy, we didn't have MCA scores last year, so it's hard to really know where our kids would have performed at. So we set a benchmark of at least 60% of our students being on 3rd grade level, a 3rd grade readiness level of reading. That number was derived on what we were seeing from our fall FAST data. We get a benchmark score and we get a sense of level of risk and where students are at. And so that's where that 60% threshold came from. And then the second goal is based on growth, which has always been a key metric for our teachers and our principals. It's not always where you start, but it's where you're going. And so for our students, particularly in a year like this, seeing growth in them is going to be very important. The achievement gap closure focuses on our SPED students and raising their achievement levels so that we have less of a gap between them and our regular ed students. That's always a tough goal, but it's something that it pushes us to focus more on how we serve those students. And you see that in our safe school learning models in how we're trying to serve those students. And then finally, due to everything that changes and shifts in a year like this, our teachers and our principals, their focus is really on the social, emotional learning and supports and the mental health and wellness of our students. And that's where it needs to be. And so despite the fact that legislative action requires us to submit this report each year, that focus is going to be maintained by the district, as we noted in our strategic plan, on making sure that we're supporting kids where we really need to support them this year. Any questions?
Good job as usual, Amy, with that.
Thank you, Ron.
Make a motion to approve the World's Best Workforce Plan is for submission to the state.
I'll make a second to Scott's the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Roll call.
Winkles,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Hanson.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Penny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes. Carbajal,
Yes.
thank you.
All voting in favor, the motion carries. The next item then is the January reorganization meeting.
There's a couple of supporting documents under this agenda item, board members, for you. It's a draft proposal for the 2021 school board meetings schedule. And for those of you listening, the board reorganizes following the calendar year. So we'll bring on a new school board member, and then we will need to take care of school district business and set that new calendar. So I'm proposing this as a draft. We can discuss it at our January meeting. But we would need, I believe, a motion tonight, Mr. Chair, to approve a January 6th reorganization meeting. And then as you dig into this, board members, it's a slight change to our current model of board meetings. And what it would mean is having work sessions the first Wednesday of the month, and then the regular meeting the third Wednesday of the month. And that, I think that works well for being able to discuss some of our items prior to the regular meeting. Works out, the first and third schedule really works out well, avoiding any holidays or other breaks that we sometimes have to avoid. So again, it's a draft, but do need your support for a January 6th reorganization meeting.
My problem with the first and the third is I have council meetings the first and the third. I think that's why we switched this over the last couple of years to the other Wednesdays.
That's right, Ozzy. Thank you. I can bring a second and fourth model. That's not a problem. I'll put that together and share it out with the group so you can see what those dates look like. How about that reorganization meeting, Ozzy? Is that, obviously that'll be a conflict?
I mean, I can make that one work. I wouldn't be able to make all of them because of I have to be at the council meetings as well. But I can make that January 6th meeting.
And then, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I mean, do we do we stick with what we are doing? I mean, I don't want to shift the meeting and then have Ozzy have conflicts for a good number of them.
Yeah, I forgot all about that, so I can see us sticking with what we've done. And I'll put that calendar together for the board to review prior to January 6th.
All right, so if we can get a motion to set January 6th at 6 o'clock as our reorganizational meeting, then we can address this, the rest of the meetings at that time.
And that'll be a reorganizational and a regular meeting to be able to conduct business, or you want to limit it to just reorganization?
Yeah, Sue can chime in here, but we typically have it's better for accounts payable to have that regular meeting a little bit later in the month, that second week versus the first week. So Sue, would we be able to do that on January 6th?
Yeah, I think will we be having a January, the third week meeting in January?
And that could be a regular meeting as well, but I mean, we're not limiting. We're not limiting the January 6th, right?
Right. We could do the January 6th, but just this one time, that'd be fine.
So if we did a reorganization and a work session and then did a regular board meeting on the third Wednesday, fourth Wednesday, does that make sense to be able to do that?
You're talking about the reorganization meeting on the 6th, right?
So on the 6th, the reorganization meeting. After that, close that and do a work session. I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about. Maybe not, but and then do another board meeting later.
And the only reason I mean, there's nothing in state law, and we used to have the reorganizational meeting used to be a regular meeting, so you can conduct other business. And the only reason I ask is, we're just coming back from kind of the holiday break and stuff. So if there's anything that we need to address, don't want to limit the agenda.
Yeah, I would agree with Scott because of since we're starting on the 4th, if something changes, we need to take board action. I would suggest we be able to do that on that 6th.
If we went with the 2nd and the 4th, if we just, if we're getting payments out to folks, if we made this is discussion certainly we can have in January as well, but if we go with the board meeting on the 4th, then we're holding a lot of payments, are we not? If we did it on the 4th Wednesday versus if we did the regular meeting on the 2nd Wednesday.
Right. What I'm saying is if you want to do the organizational meeting and the regular board meeting on the first Wednesday of the 6th, that would be fine for the bills.
How about for following, just so we'd have a work session and a board meeting each month? So would it be better to have, and Greg, Mr. Johnson, if you would weigh in too, would it be better to have the board meeting on the 2nd, the earlier one of the month to be the board meeting, and the later one in the month to be the work session planned for the board meeting the following month? Does that make sense?
It does. So we'll align with what we've been doing this year, which is no problem.
All right, so on the 6th, we would do our regular meeting with our reorganization.
Correct.
Board members, can we get a motion to support that?
I'd make a motion to approve a January 6th reorganization meeting at 6 PM, which will also be a regular board meeting.
All right, we have a motion from Matt,
I'll second it.
and second from Scott. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, roll call.
Winkles.
Yep.
Olson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes, Carball.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, all voting in favor, the motion carries. Next, we have a number of policies, one first read and a couple of second reads. Mr. Johnson, anything you want to point out there?
Just real quickly, the first read policy of classified substitute policy, typically when we settle the support staff contract, we revisit the substitute policy, and you'll see that we're paying support staff subs $12.75 an hour with an incentive. If they work more than 30 days, that time goes up. So we'll have to look at this 3 reads anyway. So Sue and I will tweak this and bring it back to you with we're going to propose a slight increase to the daily rate of pay for our classified subs. Just want to get that on your radar, but that'll come next month. We have plenty of time. That's all I have for policies.
All right, board members, any question on the policies? All right, we'll move on to committee reports. Anything to report on? If not, superintendent report.
I just want to remind board members, take a minute and get to the MSBA website if you can. The leadership conference is virtual this year, January 14th, 21st, and 28th. It's morning sessions on those 3 Thursdays. And if you would like to sign up, just let me or Amy know, and we'll take care of that for you. We are going to conduct a virtual auction for the school district. We conducted an auction, a live auction a few years ago. We had some surplus equipment we needed to get rid of. We need to follow policy in doing that, and we intend to do that again. We have some equipment that we'd like to either dispose of or have someone purchase. So we have an administrative meeting tomorrow, and we'll set some dates, but just so you know, board members, that will go live here probably sometime in January, and it will involve a web-based virtual auction where we will need to notify people in the paper, and then they have a time frame to go on our website and go ahead and bid on items that they have that they're interested in. We
Mr. Johnson, are we going to do that ourselves, or are we going to use something like KBID, or what are you thinking there?
We're just going to do it ourselves. We'll ask, we'll have the auction open for a period of time where people can submit closed bids to our business office, and then have a public opening of those bids at a designated date, then award the items.
Okay, so it'll be, okay, got it. So we're not trying to do it through some software we have to buy or install or maintain. Okay, thank you.
Correct. You're welcome. I want to give a shout out to our education foundation, and our staff isn't aware of this yet. I'll be sending out a message to all staff tomorrow, likely, that thanks to the Ed Foundation quarterbacking this and organizing it, we are going to provide a free beverage, coffee or other beverage drink, to all staff next week. And so Gathering Grounds in Avon and Cornerstone in Albany have got on board to be involved in that, to support our staff. And the sponsors of that, the financial backers, are the no surprise probably to anyone when you hear the Central Minnesota Credit Union, Chrysler Center and Tanny Division, and then the Albany JCs are going to fund that donation to our staff, recognizing the incredible amount of work that everybody's doing right now during this pandemic. So thank you to those organizations. And then if you get a chance to drive by the electronic billboard out in front of school, there's a nice little recognition that you'll see when you drive by. So I'd like to just take a second to say thank you to Mr. Paulson for his service to the board. He left for a little bit and thankfully came back and joined us for the past 4 years. And Ron, you have a passion and a commitment and just an incredible dedication to our school district and service to our students. And it's just fun to watch over the years, your involvement with robotics and our tech ed program and theater arts and the beat programming. And I think another good example of your generosity and commitment was last spring in helping Mr. Wiggy put together a stage for our students and their graduation outside. So Ron, it's just amazing to watch. You're going to be missed, and we really appreciate what you've done for Albany area schools.
Thank you. It's a tough gig to walk away from, but it sure has been a wonderful 20 years. It was 20 years ago, actually, this past October that I started getting involved in the theater, and only by accident. I just kept coming back, and Tim and I started the robotics team, and 9 years ago this year, Tim, I think we started that thing, and it's been a good run. I've enjoyed it. I'll miss the board. I'll miss all the board action. I'll miss the principals and all the staff. It's been so much fun over the years having that personal contact with the staff in the schools. It's by being involved in things, you get a far better handle on really what's going on behind the scenes in the school. Much better than you do just sitting in a board seat. It's really been good. Board, you've got a great superintendent. You've got a great board member, Tim Sand, coming on. He's going to be good. And Tim, I'm going to tell Tim the same thing, that he's got a great board to work with and a great superintendent. So it's been wonderful. I'm going to have some emotion come January 6th when I don't dial in, but hey, it's time. It's time for somebody else to share this fun. So, but thank you all. It's been good. That sign, I just about had an accident yesterday. I just started to turn the corner, and there's a car coming up to the stop sign, and I'm looking at the sign, and I'm not seeing the car, and I just about hit. The last minute I did catch it, and I had to make a big swerve, but that was quite a surprise. Also, Cassie, in the newsletter, or Greg, whoever put that together for Community Ed, that was a nice little piece. It was.
Thank you, Ron.
Ron, thank you for your service, and I'm sure you will continue to be around and supporting everybody around the school.
Yes, yeah, that's a for sure. So.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Your ticket for inattentive driving is in the mail, but otherwise, thank you for,
really.
Yeah, he's coming from an insurance man too.
Yeah, really, that's pretty scary.
It's been great working with you. Thanks for all you've done. And we hope to keep you engaged still with robotics and theater, even in your retirement from the board.
I will be around. That's a given.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Ron, so much for your service and partnership. We really appreciate it.
Yep, you are welcome, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Yeah.
That's all I had, Mr. Chair. And just a reminder, Matt and Don, if you get a chance, if you can swing in the next day or two, we've got a few documents for you to sign.
All right. Well, that concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn. My last and final motion
Motion from Ron. Is there a
Yep.
second?
Second.
Second from Scott.
Yep.
All those in favor, a roll call?
Winkles,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Kreitzer, yes, Carbajal.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:45. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.